This is Nina. Welcome back to NV Fine Art Studio. Today I would like to talk about how to put an emphasis on the focal point. In other words, how to interpret a scene in order to tell a story. This is the most important and most difficult task for an artist, and not many talk about it. It is quite common to take a picture and just copy it as is. You may ask why not? What is wrong with that? Probably nothing, except there is no need for that. A 4K camera can do it in a split second. You do not need years of experience and 2 hours of painting to make a record of what is in front of you. It is like telling a 6 o'clock news. No one would fall in love with it. No one would love to buy it and listen to it again and again and again. Making an art painting can be associated with writing a novel. When people read it, it has to capture their heart and mind and stay there forever. In order to do so in a painting, you need to use visual language, but also you need to use proper techniques to be able to speak this language. Let's go over this step by step in do and don't format, which I believe is the most effective way to explain things visually from both sides of the equation. The first 2 points will be addressing the techniques and tools. I know I talk about it a lot, but just in case you are new to my channel and have not watched any other videos. Firstly, I would always recommend to prevent the back of the paper. It will keep the moisture for longer and will reduce the buckling. Also, use the spray bottle to add dampness to the front surface. This will help to create even washes. It is much harder to work on a fully dry surface. You are more likely to develop uneven dry edges. The next point is to use larger brush for the first wash. A smaller brush, even if it's a mop brush, doesn't hold enough liquid to paint large shapes without reloading. So you will be spending valuable time on reloading and remixing rather than painting, which again may result in an uneven wash. So, taking into consideration that the first wash is very watery, it is particularly useful to use a larger brush to do it. It holds a lot of water, it allows to cover larger areas very quickly, hence creating cleaner washes. You also can very quickly change the tone or value without worrying about forming a dry edge in between. And it takes us straight to the importance of using correct values in order to put an emphasis on the focal point. Just a reminder that if you wish to see this demonstration of the good example in full, it is available on my Patreon, the link in the description below and in the right top corner. When you do your first wash, you need to make sure you use the correct consistency and correct value. Your mixture needs to be somewhere between dirty water and 70-30 water to paint ratio and value 1-4 in tone. Even if you are using yellows and oranges, adding more color into the mix will not make the mixture lighter. It will make it darker. Please note how much water is gathered at the bottom of the wash. This is how much water I use for the first wash to make it light and transparent. Don't use too much pigment for your first wash. If your wash is too thick, the ratio is 50-50 and above, and the value is in the middle range, somewhere between 5 and 7, you will lose the light in your painting. Even if you leave a few pure white areas, it will not create the sense of glow for you. Please note how dry and thick the mixture is when I apply it to the paper and how dull the shape looks. This takes us further to the tonal values for the second wash. Make sure that you are using at least 50-50 water to paint ratio and the mixture is at least 2 steps darker than the previous wash. In other words, the tonal value is between 5 and 10. Using thicker mixture for your second wash will ensure good coverage and good contrast. And as a result, this will lead to creating a good sense of depth in your painting. If your first wash is darker than supposed to be, don't make a slightly darker tone for your second wash. Your second wash has to be significantly darker in order to create depth. If you want to bring the maximum attention to the focal point, make sure there is a good contrast in this area. In other words, the difference between the tonal value of the first wash and the tonal value of the second wash is the greatest in the focal point. Don't use darker tonal values all over the place, even if this is what you see in real life or the photo. This will reproduce the reality, but will majorly distract from the focal point. Paint areas that surround the focal point less contrasty and less detailed. To do so, you will need to ignore what you see in front of you or the photograph and just paint the shape with a few minor differentiations in value. In order to bring attention to the focal point, we need to differentiate it, and this is a very good way to do so. Don't add any of the lightest lights, such as white, and the darkest darks, such as black, in the surrounding focal point areas. Don't add any details to the big shapes, to the people, to the cars, and things like that. Bright white and black shapes, no matter how small they are, usually jump at us, and we definitely don't want this to happen in the less important areas. We talked about tonal values. Now let's see what we can do with colors to attract attention to the focal point. If you want to use brighter colors for big shapes in your painting, it is best to reserve them for the focal point. You obviously will need to add a shape of this color somewhere else for the color harmony, but the main big shape in this bright color is better to use only in the focal point. The reason is always the same: bright colors attract attention, and we want it to reserve to the focal point. Even if you see bright blue sky, luscious green trees, bright red earrings and things like that all over the place in the scene, it doesn't mean you have to include all of this in your painting. Just focus on what's the most important area in your painting. Bring the color there and the rest should be ignored. Otherwise, the painting will look the same everywhere. It will look messy, most likely flat and chaotic. If you are to use a bright color in your painting, make sure to support it with a complementary. For example, I used red for the sunshade here in the focal point, and there is a green tree next to it. The rest of the painting is just cool and warm neutrals. In other words, red and green complement each other and neutrals make them more pronounced. This brings balance and sophistication to the painting and most of the attention to the focal point. Don't forget about color harmony. Don't use blue for the sky, green for the trees, sandstone yellow for the buildings, and gray for the asphalt, just because this is what you think that this is the correct color for the object. You need to think like an artist and not like a land surveyor who puts facts in the spreadsheet. Art needs interpretation and storytelling, and it's best to use visual language. Very similar to the difference between the language used to tell news and the language used in fiction literature. I'm not sure if anyone is interested in the news that the sky is blue and the tree is green. Also, it is a matter of perception. For example, I painted the sky in cool gray and warm neutrals, but because these two hues are complementary and contrast each other, the cool gray part of the sky actually reads blue and looks very convincing. On the other hand, if we look at the unsuccessful painting, the sky painted in cobalt and ultramarine blue, and the bright green trees painted with a mix of lemon yellow on cobalt turquoise. Very beautiful bright green, and in combination look very artificial with the blue. Here are the two finished paintings side by side. Let's look at them and go through these do's and don'ts points very quickly again. Pre-wetting the paper. Using larger brush. Using correct consistency and correct value for each wash. Make sure that there is the greatest contrast in the focal point area. Reserve the brighter colors for the focal point area. Add complementary color to the bright color in the focal point area for the color harmony. Use neutrals in the surrounding areas to emphasize the significance of the brighter color in the focal point. This is all for today. If you wish to learn more, please head to Patreon. The good example will be there in full with my detailed explanation of why and how. There is also a private Facebook group for the masterclass members to post attempts and receive my feedback. The link is in the description below. Hope this video was informative and enjoyable. If so, please like, subscribe, leave a comment if you have any questions. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.